22nd chapter of the book of Yirmiyahu, Komar Adonai. Reid Beit Melech Yudah, v'dibarta sham et hadavar hazeh. Yirmiyahu is told to go down to the castle of the king of Judah and speak to him the following words. So it's not close to mentioned here who the king is, but we'll get to it. And it seems to be that this is a palace that was not built on top of the hill, right? You're supposed to go down. It was built in a valley of some sort. V'amarta, and say to him, Shma dvar Adonai melech Yudah yoshev al kisei David, ata v'avadecha v'amcha habaim basharim ha'eleh. So listen, king of Yehuda, who sits on the throne of David, right? That's supposed to be a great responsibility to sit on the throne of David. You and your servants, your nation, and everybody who comes into these gates, right? You have a big job to do. You have look who's the measuring stick is King David. Ko amar Adonai, asu mishpat utzdaka, vatzilu gazul miyad ashok, v'ger yatom va'almana al tonu, al tachmosu v'dam naki al tishpechu b'makom hazeh. What does God say? You should act with justice and righteousness. And that was a quality that was there from the get-go with the kingdom. That David asa mishpat utzdaka. We have the same descriptions early in the life of Shlomo. You should help those who are defrauded, those who are robbed, those who, right, the stranger, the widow, the orphan. That's what he's saying to here. And there shouldn't be much blood. There should be no blood spilled in this place. And during the reign of Yehoiakim, what happened in 609 is when Yoshiyahu, the great king, the earliest king during the reign of Yirmiyahu, who has the great revival of Tshuva and brings Bnei Yisrael back, at least to an extent. And then he's replaced by his son after he's killed in battle in 609 by the Egyptians. His son reigns for 3 months. And then a new king, Yehoiakim, who's also from his family, is then made the king. And he reigns from 608 to 597. And his reign is one that's described in the book of Kings as not being a good one. And it ends when he finally rebels against Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar removes him, cuts out his eyes, takes him back to Babylon along with the leaders in the year 597. And that's who this presumably is being addressed to, that you're not acting the right way. And what we have here is a problem of social justice, a problem of fraud, a problem of the wealthy taking advantage of the disenfranchised. Continuing in verse 4, if you would listen to this, then through the gates of this palace will enter the kings of David's line, who will sit on the throne riding horse-drawn chariots with their courtiers and their subjects. But if you don't, your palace will be destroyed. God doesn't say here you can't live a nice life. You can have your chariots, you can live nicely, you and your courtiers in the palace, but don't attain that wealth through the defrauding of those who are disenfranchised, by those who have disadvantages in society for a myriad of different reasons. This is what God said. You are as Gilad to me. You are like the summit of Lebanon, but I will make you a desert. I will make you uninhabited towns, right? You are special to me is what God's saying. You're like the high mountains, but the way you're acting is not that way. I'll appoint destroyers against you, each with their own kalim, each with their own different choice of destructive weapon. They'll cut down your trees, your cedar trees, and make them fall into fire. Right. So this is right again. So here we have the mountain. Here we have the cedar, the great sign, the great tree of the ancient world. Right, still on the Lebanese flag still today, and that's right. The tallest things, the greatest things, your palaces, the things that are most choice, even those will be destroyed. We're verse 8. And the nations will come to the city. And the last other, what did God do to this great city? In the second half of that verse, as we've pointed many times, is working off of Dvarim, from the Tochacha in Dvarim. Right, Amasa Hashem Kacha Amasa Kacha La'ir Hazot is a play off of that expression. And again, right, over and over again, we're told that it's items that are going to be so terrible that it's going to shock everybody. The Amru, because they forsook, they left their covenant with God and worshipped idols. Al tivku lamet, v'al tanudu lo. Don't weep for the dead and don't lament him. B'chu v'cho lahaloch. Weep rather for those who are living. Ki lo yashuv od v'ra'ah et eretz moladato. For he shall never come back to see the land of his birth. And to me, this is a little bit like the end of the last chapter. End of the last chapter, right? It was also working off Dvarim, the idea of v'charta b'chayim, will you choose life? Which path are you going to choose? But in the last chapter, what Yirmiyahu said was, what are you going to choose? Are you going to choose death or are you going to choose servitude? So right here, it reminds me of a letter, I believe, that my great-great-grandparents sent to my great-grandparents in the 1930s in Germany, where they said that the living are jealous of the dead before they were taken off to Auschwitz or wherever it is that they were murdered. Because this is what God says about Shulam, the son of Yoshiyahu, who succeeded his father, who has gone forth from this place. He shall never come back. He won't come back. And this was a king who only lasted, as we said, for a few months. Few months is all that he lasted for. He lasted for 3 months until the Babylonians got rid of him. Because the place to which he is exiled, he will die, and he will not see this place again. Hayo hoy boneh veito b'lo tzedek, v'aliotav b'lo mishpat, b're'ehu yavod chinam, ufalo lo yitein lo. He builds his house, and how does he build it? Below tzedek, not with fair tax dollars, with unfair. His upper chambers with injustice. He makes his neighbors work without pay, and he does not give them their wages, taking advantage of the average worker. Ha'omer evneli beit midot va'aliot meruvachim, who thinks I'll build me a huge palace with spacious chambers. V'karalo chalonai v'safun ba'arez u'mashoach b'shashar. I'll have windows. We'll have cedar panels. Vermilion. It's going to be beautiful palace. I'm the king. I deserve it. Do you think you're more of a king because you have a beautiful palace, because you're surrounded by cedars? Your father Yoshiyahu, how was he the king? He was a king with justice. That's what he did. And that's why everything went with him and things were good for a number of years. Yes, he lived like a king and he lived well, but he didn't do it living well through injustice. He did it through justice. He treated the people fairly and kindly. Dan, we're in verse 16. Din ani ve'avyon azto. He upheld the rights of the poor and the needy. Halo hi hadato tinu Adonai. And that, right, and all was good because he knew me. He followed my ways. Ki ein einecha v'libcha ki emal bitz'echa. V'yadam anaki l'shpoch v'al oshek v'al mrutzah la'aso. But your eyes, they're only on your ill-gotten gains, on the shedding of the blood of the innocent, on committing fraud and violence. And so here, right, we're being told about the horrific reign of the son of Yoshiyahu, and how sad it is. Yoshiyahu following his father Achaz, who's a terrible king, and his grandfather Menashe, who's the worst of the kings. And there's that hope for the future, but it goes away with Shulam and with Yehoyakim, who's about to be introduced as this king. Lachen ko amar Adonai Yehoyakim ben Yoshia melech Yehuda, lo yispedulo hoy achi v'hoy achot, lo yispedulo hoy adon v'hoy hodo. Yehoyakim, you son of Yehuda, you son of Yoshiyahu, you will not be mourned. Nobody's going to say, oh, my brother, my sister. They're not going to mourn for him. Oh, Lord, majesty. He's not going to be mourned. There's going to be no hesped. There's going to be no eulogy. Furat chamur yikaver, sachov v'hashlech mehalal l'sharei shalom. He shall have the burial of a donkey, dragged down and left lying outside the gates of Jerusalem. So this is not a fully true statement as to what happens, because eventually Yehoyakim, he is pulled out. His children are killed. He becomes a prisoner in Bavel. But the book of Melachim, if you remember the last verses of the book of Melachim, Yehoyakim is sort of restored to a place of respect in well, I got it wrong because it's not Yehoiakim, it's Yehoiachin. So I take it back. So Yehoiakim does get this, and Yehoiachin is the king who is his brother is the one who is placed back into the situation. We'll have to delete that part of the video. So continuing to where we are here. So he's going to get this terrible thing, and that's what he deserves because he doesn't use justice. He doesn't dispense justice, right? You think that that's how you became great. That's not going to work for you. Ali, Halevanon, Utsaki, Uvashan, Tnikolech. Climb Lebanon and cry out. Raise your voice to the brush. Cry to all your lovers that you're crushed. Dibarti elecha bishal votayich. Amarta lo eshma zed darkech benurayich ki lo shamata bekoli. I spoke to you when you were prosperous. You said, I will not listen. That was always your way from earth. You would not heed me, right? Things were good. You took over for your father and things were in a good place. All of your shepherds will be devoured by the wind. All your lovers will go into captivity. Then you will be shamed and humiliated because of your embarrassment, because of the evil that has happened. Yo Shabbat bilvanon mikunanat ba'arazim manechant bevolach chavalim chil kiyoleda. You who dwell in Lebanon amongst the cedars, will you have any grace when the pains come upon you, when the horrors of things like childbirth come upon you, right? And I don't think this really means those who are living in Lebanon, but again, it's the idea of the arazim. The cedars is what we're referring to. The cedars that are the great trees that were used to build right? It's like the Titanic, the boat that can never sink. The palaces that were built so grandly that they will never be destroyed. Kanyahu ben Yoyakim melech Yudah chotam al yad yemini ki misham et kancha. As I live, declares God, if you, O King Koniah, son of Yehoiakim of Yehudah, were a signet on my right hand, I would tear you off even from there. And so, right, God saying, even if you were right on top of me, I would destroy you. And this refers to, it says, Kaniyahu, usually is referred to as Yechoniyahu, is the way that we refer to him. And I will deliver you into the hands of your enemies. And those who you are dread, those who you're scared of. And you will be delivered to Nebuchadnezzar in the hands of the Kasdim, the Chaldeans. The second we pointed out, I believe it was yesterday, finally, we've had lots of the people coming from the north, the winds from the north, the destruction from the north. They're coming across, they're coming down the mountains, they're coming into the territory of Ephraim, they're coming to the territory of Binyamin. And finally, in chapters 21 and 22, we finally have them identified as the people that we know will destroy Jerusalem, destroy the temple, destroy the monarchy, which is the Babylonians. Vehitalti otcha v'etimcha asher yiladetcha al haaretz acheret asher lo yuladatem. Sham b'sham tamuta, and I will throw you and your mother who bore you into another land where you were not born, and where you will die. And the land that you're not going to return to the land that you yearn to come back to. It's not going to happen. Is this man Koniah? Is he just a broken pot, a vessel that no one wants? Why are he and his offspring thrown away and cast away into a land that they don't know? Eretz, Eretz, Eretz. Shemi Devar Adonai. Land, land, land. Right? It's like a modern Hebrew Zionist song. But this is saying it differently. Listen, land, to what God says. Ko Amar Adonai. Kitvu ta'ish hazeh ariri gever lo yitzlach bima. God says, record this man as one who has no succession, one who shall never be found successful or acceptable. Ki lo yitzlach mizaro ish yoshev al kisei David umoshel od bihuda. Because none from his offspring will be accepted to sit on the throne of David and to rule again from Yehudah. That's what is said. And it's very, very harsh that that's what it said. It can be from a family member. It can be from a nephew, a descendant of David. But it's not going to it's not going to happen in his lifetime. And while we have not gotten there, and it's far off in terms of the books of the Tanakh, eventually the successor in the early part of the Second Temple period is Zerubbabel. Zerubbabel is a descendant of Yehoiachin. He is a direct descendant of David. He becomes sort of the pasha. The word that's used in the book of Haggai to describe him is the pichet, and he's a direct descendant of King David, direct descendant of these people we're talking about in the chapter here. But he gains an acceptance in the year 539 when Yehoiakim is dead, when Yehoiachin is dead, when all of these kings that are mentioned here who didn't ask justice, who didn't act justly, he becomes the leader of Bnei Yisrael. You may know his name from Mosur, Kates Bavel, Zerubbabel. Who's that guy, Zerubbabel? Zerubbabel is the person who rebuilds the temple, and we're not there yet, but we'll preview. In the book of Haggai, Haggai offers a prophecy and says, if the Jews listen during the Second Temple period, then God says, I will make a mahapecha. I will switch everything over. I will change. The empires will rise and others will fall, and you will sit again on the king, as king on the throne of your ancestor David. The Jews don't act correctly. It never happens. But the leadership remains in the family of David, even in the early Second Temple period. But what's being said to here is there needs to be a break. It's almost like going back to Shiloh. Shiloh was destroyed, and it couldn't be rebuilt right away. We needed to have Shmuel come on the scene. Shmuel had to rebuild things, had to bring back prophecy to Israel. And then over time, eventually, we get to David, we get to Shlomo, we can build the new, more permanent house. And so too here, we couldn't just have the destruction and immediately come back. There needed to be time. There needed to be a lesson learned. Bnei Yisrael, to an extent, learned that lesson. Some of them went back. They rebuilt the temple. A descendant of David, Zerubbabel, leading them as the political leader in Israel. But unfortunately, he never comes and truly sits on the throne as, in a sense, predicted in this chapter.